Hi everybody, my name's Graham. I am a product engineer on the ArcGIS Hub and Open Data out of the DC Center. That means I get to work a lot with the software development folks and requirements and you all, about features and things like that. This talk is getting started with Open Data and initiatives in the ArcGIS Hub. If you haven't figured it out, we renamed ArcGIS Open Data to ArcGIS Hub. So that's what that's all about. So if you've used Open Data before, pretty much the same capabilities, just wrapped into that different product. There's a whole other set of functionality there, but I won't talk about that today. How many of you have enabled Open Data in your organizations? Okay. So we're going to cover basic end-to-end of setting up an Open Data site, cover some tips and tricks, and give you some resources as you guys get going down there. So give you a quick overview of what Open Data is, why we think it's important. Demonstrate Open Data capabilities. Just talk about preparing your data and best practices if you're kind of just getting started. I'll show you how to do an Open Data site from our new initiatives framework, which is we have a Share Open Data initiative you can join, which is a kind of a different way to do it. I'll also show you the kind of ground up way to do it, where you just curate everything yourself. Talk a little bit about data federation. Then we'll talk about mapping your open data, demonstrating civic initiatives and why we think that's important. So like once you do open data, what do you do next? And what are some of our ideas and what have we seen? And I'll end with a little brief roadmap about where we're going with the application, some of the new features coming in the short term, couple weeks, and long term, 6 months or so. And I'd say hold your questions, write them down or something, and at the end I'll do a Q&A. And if there's any other questions after that, we can meet afterwards. So quick overview, why open data? Why put your data on the internet? Well, historically, this was how it was done. You would share data physically, either thumb drives, FTP sites. It's static, it's offline. There's this kind of mindset of having to sell your data. You'd have to meet with somebody and you'd be like, hey, I want you to use my data, take my data, and you have to kind of do something with it. And it's very offline and very specific. The modern expectations of sharing is that you can find things on the internet. I'm sure you guys know this in your kind of personal lives. You just expect data to be out there, especially public data, especially from local governments and state governments, things like that. So there's kind of this implicit expectation that information is available to you. And solutions should be connected to the source. There shouldn't be this batch extract and then putting up on a site that can get stale or be forgotten about and fail to maintain. So we launched Open Data about 4 years ago as Esri to connect your authoritative sources of the data to the public and give you an application, a way to allow people to find that data, Google search it, retrieve it, and get it. We want this to be you. In the middle, you have an Open Data site, and you should be able to connect to all the different groups that are interested in your data. And there's quite a few. Agencies, staffs, community leaders, citizens, academia, startups, econ development, they're all interested in where to put businesses, what's going on in the city, health and safety, all sorts of information. So if they can find your information, then they're going to be able to organically grow this kind of community of innovation. It also helps internally. If you've ever had somebody read a paper you wrote or check your work, it's that on a whole different scale. So if you have to publish your data authoritatively, cross-departmentally, that means people know where to get your information. And a lot of this information is valuable to multiple departments, but may only originate from one. So by doing open data, you're not just servicing the community and external to your organization people, you're also servicing internal, because you're kind of forcing yourself to clean the data up, make it intuitive, and make it available online. So pretty useful from that side too. Open data is and always will be part of the ArcGIS platform. It's included in your subscription to ArcGIS Online. It's just served out of an application called the Hub now, but it's still an open data capability. You turn it on. And our goal is to be simple, integrated, and open. We don't want you to have to change your workflows and the way you do business with our software. We want you just to be able to do open data. There are some best practices. I'll talk about those, but they're basically tweaks to existing data sources. And we wrap it all up with an open data site. So unlike a portal that everybody in this room probably understands how to use, we want to wrap it in such a way that anybody could look at your website and figure out what's going on and get value out of it. So we'll talk a lot about those websites in a little bit. ArcGIS is also a complete open data solution in that we offer the ability to search everyone's open data. It's this yellow page now. It used to be a different color. But if you go to hub.arcgis.com and you click on the Open Data tab, or if you go to opendata.arcgis.com, you have this ability to search everyone's open data that's hosted by Esri. This is really useful if you're ever trying to do a research as to what your neighbors are doing, what data sets are out there, what are some other best practices. Also, when open data, you can actually federate data from other governments and make that available on your websites. So you don't just have to feature your open data on your websites. You can feature open data relevant to your area. Because the boundaries, of your jurisdiction are really just for governments. Probably the people who live around those boundaries don't really realize that there's a wall just on a certain street and somebody else has data in a different place. So featuring data from other communities is a good idea on your open data sites. When we built open data, we built it to be accessible, and I mean that kind of literally, in that the websites that present this information are 508 compliant, they are mobile responsive, they respond well to screen readers, anybody can use them, and trying to be as simple as possible about how we present information to make it intuitive. We want it to be discoverable, so we do a lot of effort behind the scenes to list you in Google. We recommend you use HTTPS version of our sites now that we have them, because that'll raise your page rank. We help expose your metadata and things like that. So we want, if somebody types in a data set and your community name, ideally we want to see your site and that data set high in Google so that's easy to find, because that's usually how people go and search for information. We want your users, your citizens, your potential business people to be able to explore the data, to know what's in the data before they download it. They shouldn't have to open it in Excel and squint their eyes. We offer visualization of the data where possible, and we want it to be collaborative so that you can work with your neighbors about the open data near you, and you can work with them with the data, data commenting and things like that. Are also interesting. We also want to make sure that they know where to reach you if they have questions about the data. A lot of times, if you're ever doing a story as a journalist, you will find a data set potentially on a site and you have to figure out if it's real. So it's really important to be able to connect to you to make sure that the data is valid and trustworthy before somebody uses it. Open data in the hub is, we have about 8,000 organizations doing open data. They've at least thrown the switch, and they're at some level of sophistication from that point forward. We just hit the 70,000 data set mark about a week ago, which is cool because I get to say that instead of be like 69.5 or something like that. And last year alone, we did about 20 million downloads off of open data. So that's pretty cool to see, and that's been growing pretty nicely every year. And it gives you the ability to launch as many websites as you want, and that's a pretty cool capability if you think about it just alone. You don't have to invest in a contractor to build you a website and a bunch of infrastructure. You can just use the ArcGIS infrastructure. For now, open data is a capability of ArcGIS Online. It is not yet in Portal. I'll talk about that at the end. But that also gives you unlimited bandwidth of our hosted solution. There's no restrictions on number of sites, how many downloads. It doesn't eat credits in any way. So you can really go nuts. If you want to host a whole lot of things on our platform that may or may not even be data related, you can. We built it for that purpose. So if you think about it as like a way to reach the non-GIS user, there's a lot of different ways you can use this capability that you have included in your subscription. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The site editing itself is meant to be non-technical. I know this is a technical workshop, so yeah, I'm going to talk about some HTML and CSS, and it won't be kind of perfect, but we are really inspired by tools like Squarespace, WordPress, and Wix. These are, if you're ever trying to do a website for your resume or your portfolio or your band or whatever, these are consumer applications that make it pretty easy to stand things up. And we're inspired by that as a development team. We're not going to be as good as they are, because that's all they do, but we're going to be pretty good and always trying to get better. And your feedback's obviously really important in that process. Let's see. So building a site represents your organization to the public. Should be focused, on issues, departments, events, things like that. You can convert your data regardless of source into open file formats. So we'll show you that. Depending on what type of data we're looking at, there's a number of different formats we can choose from. We can apply terms of use or licensing to your data. This is really important to that kind of credibility bit. You won't use a data set if it doesn't have a license on it, typically. And if you license your data set, you can know exactly how you intend it to be used and explicitly communicate that, and in the worst case, litigate somebody who uses it incorrectly. If you don't want somebody to sell your data in their product, you can put a license on it that prevents that and kind of chop that off before it even begins. So I'll give a little bit more detail about that in a moment. We can also add context to your data sets. Since we're making websites, and the web is a wonderful place where you can stitch things together, there's a lot of web content in Esri. So, and even other things like Tableau or anything else you want to integrate. At the end of the day, it's a website, and we can put things into it. And if there's a way to communicate how your data works, and you think that's going to be useful, then you should put it on your site. And I'll show you some examples of that. We don't want you to have to change how you work with our platform. We should just sit on top of your existing workflows. So you have a couple options of where you host data. You can host it with Esri. You can have it in your portal. All you need to do is register items and then select the items you want to be open data, and then put them into a group, and then that group is then surfaced on the website. And I'll show you all of that. And we'll basically go end to end on a trial org I signed up about a week ago. So where we can basically just go all the way through all that process. Last but not least, we think metadata is really important. It's a capability you have to enable, but we actually, the search in open data is powered a lot by your metadata. So we harvest your metadata and the most recent sets of data. We basically check in on every portal once a day and say, hey, have you changed anything? Get those updates. We do also caching and things like that, so we don't beat up your little portal server too hard. We will cache data sets and things like that in our layer so that hopefully we're treading pretty lightly underneath and just trying to keep up to date with the data. What do the sites look like? They look like this. They're row-based. Notice there's blue and white, then blue again. So you pick how many rows you want, and then you fill those rows with content, and that content can stack next to each other. It's a grid-based system. I'll show you the editor. It's pretty simple. You can drag and drop things, and hopefully after you see me use it a little bit, it'll start to make sense. And we want you to build your community. I think I mentioned this already, so I'm going to skip it. All right, step one, enabling open data. How do you do it? Pretty easy. There's 4 things you have to do. 1, throw a switch. It's in your org. I'll show that to you. Number 2, create an open data group. It's a type of public group that once you've enabled open data, you say this is an open data group. It's like a setting. You can check a box, and it'll turn that public group into what's called an open data group. 3, we create a hub site, and we select one or more of those open data groups to be the data catalog for that site. And then 4, if we want non-admins to work on our open data, we just have to create a role and give them the right permissions and add them somewhere. And I'll show you kind of how to do that right now. So let's, I'm going to sit down for the demo. But I have an org. It's lovely, and it's called the UC 2017, trial organization. It basically has just a couple of pieces of data in it just to kind of simulate you having data in your organization already and online. Number 1 way to turn on open data is to go to your settings of your org as an administrator. And at the bottom, there's a tab called Open Data. And you click a button that enables it. Pretty easy, right? There's also this button to the right of it that shows you where you go to manage your sites. I'm going to click that in a moment. But before I do that, I want to do the whole bit about giving a role that has the right open data permissions now that I've done that. So I'm going to also go to my roles and create an open data version of a publisher so that I don't have to be an administrator to use this application. So I'm going to call this my open data publisher. And I'm just going to make that the description, base it on the publisher. And in the user permissions, the specific one that I want to focus on is manage open data. Where did it go? I don't know. That's unusual. Okay. Well, this worked a day ago, but there usually is a user permission. Maybe I have to refresh my browser between turning open data on and seeing that new user permission. Let's give that a roll. Let's see. And if not, I'll show you somewhere else. But yeah, okay. So refresh your browser between turning on open data and getting to this step. There's manage open data sites. This simply says I want somebody who has this role to be able to work on any sites that I'm building in this platform. So if you want to have a subset of people who you know have been to this talk or some other talk that know how to use the product, you can do it that way. I guess I've made this already from the last time I gave this talk, so I'm going to call it the second one. The other thing you have to do, so if I go back to the Open Data tab, I can now click this Manage Sites button. This takes you to hub.arcgis.com/admin. You can also log directly into this application. You don't always have to go through your org settings. Also, the app switcher within Online now, once you enable Open Data, has both a hub tile and an Open Data tile. They both go to the same place. And you will immediately be dropped on our sites list. And this is where we'll be able to get to work creating sites, and we'll do that in a minute. But back on the point about non-admin users, if I want them to work on my sites, all of our sites that we're going to be creating are items in ArcGIS Online. And if you've ever collaboratively worked on items in ArcGIS Online, you know the way to do it is to create a group, give that group update capabilities, and then share the items to that group. We've done a lot of that work for you. When you turn on Open Data, we create a hub administration group. This is a group with update capabilities, and the membership is managed in the team tab of this application. So I can add users that are non-admins here, and this will basically allow any site that I create to be collaboratively edited by any other user that I add. So if you guys are the admins, that's great. You don't need to worry about this, but if you want to enable somebody who's not, just make sure they're on the team tab and they have that permission. And that's how you can kind of get everybody up and running. All right. There is another option for enabling open data. If you don't, just so you can see it, you can also just go right to hub.arcgis.com. The nice thing about that is we have a kind of a get started flow. It's a little bit cleaner, but you can just do, sorry, I'm just going to show it to you, admin. If you log in and you haven't enabled open data, you'll be taken to this page where we're like, hey, it's cool you're here and you want to do this. Enable open data, and this button will be basically the toggle that you can do to enable that setting in your org. The nice thing about this is if you're not the admin, it'll tell you who to call, which admins in your organizations you need to bug. So that's another way to do it. All right, so next up is building a data catalog. There's a lot here, so I'm going to give you a bunch of best practices about your services, and you can argue with me if they're not right or not, but I think they are. First is humanizing your attribute values with attribute aliases. What's the difference between the data set on the left and the data set on the right? If you look at the columns of data, can your mom understand the data set on the left? Could somebody who doesn't know your organization understand that one? Chances are no, so you want to think about how usable is your data. You can even test this out on people who you don't work with and see if they can understand what your data set's all about. To do this, this is ArcMap. You can see you can set aliases on your layers and change them to be human-friendly. Second recommendation is turning on editor tracking. This is a good idea because every time data gets changed or somebody edits the service, you can see it in open data, so they can actually see like a date and who. There's actually a bug with this currently, as a couple people pointed out to me, so we're actually fixing that. It isn't updating right now, but I promise you it's going to be worth turning this on because we're going to fix that in like a week. So, but to do it, you edit the service in, and you enable this kind of deep capability for enabling editor tracking, and you pick the data set that you want, and that'll enable this functionality. That's really nice because people will look at your open data site and they'll wait for your updates, and they might want to update their systems, and so this will push all that through to the page where you can download the data in open data. A little bit of best practice about simplifying and reducing the number of vertices for large data. Server, it's like typical software guy, but the latest version's the best. Your kind of experience may vary as you get older. We don't recommend you change the default maximum number of records returned from the server for performance reasons. So just leave that as it is. That's right there. And it's set to 1,000. Oh, sorry. And that's there. It's set to 1,000. Don't change it. we've had some issues if people do that and can cause performance problems. Service capabilities, if you want to use a data standard on your service, you can enable that. So if you want to use WMS, WFS, WCS for your data, all you have to do is enable it, and those will be available in Open Data. And that's pretty useful if you're trying to federate your data into a government that wants you to basically send the data in a standard. So just make sure you enable those. We recommend you turn off feature access if it's not needed. It adds cost to how much performance and time it takes to download a data set from your server. So if you don't need to use that feature, then turn that feature access off. Those are all here on the capabilities screen. So if you want different data formats, you can check them on. And again, turn off feature access if you do not need it, because it'll make things faster. What's the results of turning these on? This is a data set page, so I haven't even shown you what the websites look like. Shame on me, but I will. And this is what your data set will look like in Open Data. And if you pull that API list down, you can see we'll list all of the different formats that you support. So by ticking those capabilities on, you'll get more rows. And again, that's pretty useful if you're trying to federate this data into another system and things like that. Let's see, organize layers into multiple services. We don't support more than 20 layers in a single service. So don't give us the monster item that has all of your layers. Give us services that are ideally logically grouped. And if you can give us multiple layers in a service, just don't go over 20. Hosted or on-premise? I get this question a lot. And I think a few days ago, my talk track on this slide was a little different. So I'm going to see if I can break down the different options. It's good to be on your own portal if you want to always be connected to the authoritative source and you're not moving data up into online. We definitely prefer the data hosted in online because we can guarantee performance and you don't have to worry about scalability. If you have a lot of data that's changing a lot, online's pretty nice because online tells us when it has changed itself, whereas your portal does not, and we just have to ask it once a day, which isn't really a performance hit, but means that we might be a little bit out of date if you change your data frequently throughout the day, and only once a day we ask and see that the data has changed and cache a new version of it. So we definitely recommend online. However, I totally get that if you already have data in Portal and you want to be next to the authoritative source, moving data up into online is like the FTP creating a disk and thing I talked about that's bad. So don't do it in that case, but just kind of make that trade-off decision. If your data doesn't update that frequently, or you're not really concerned about the 24-hour thing, like being a little bit stale in a day, then I think you will be okay hosting it in Portal. But you don't get any of those benefits, and if your server goes down, then your open data site's down. So that's kind of a bummer, and it's not really our fault. Whereas if it's hosted by us, we have to keep all that running and running quickly. So use that to kind of make your decision, and definitely large data sets. Hold your questions to the end, but unless you have something specific or.
Yeah, there is like a hybrid option.
Yeah, hybrid option is great. That's the best of both.
I don't know about it. That's the reason.
There is a hybrid option. You can actually host in both and mirror your data up into online, and it kind of does it for you. Those hybrid hosted feature services are really good because it's kind of taken care of by both online and your portal.
Like out of the box.
Mm-hmm. Yes, out of the box. But definitely make sure your large data sets are hosted by us. Again, we're responsible for making the underlying systems are scaled to those data sets and are performing properly. And you can call us if they're not. And we actually monitor download times that exceed a certain threshold and jump right on the ones that are really problematic. We can't really jump right on the ones that we don't manage. So we just can kind of watch them and notify you. Structured metadata, really important. It increases the quality of the search results in Open Data. It also increases the quality and usability of your data. If you don't know what metadata is, it's a setting you actually have to enable by default. I really want them to change that and make it always on. But you have to opt into what type of metadata you want, which is why it's off, so you can choose what type of metadata standard you want to enforce. If you enable it, you get this nice URL on your data set that takes you to an HTML version of your metadata and makes it really easy to understand what the different fields mean and all of that good stuff that's in your data set. Really, really important, makes your data absolutely the best quality and understandability from people. To enable it, it's in your org settings, it's under item details, and it's in the metadata section. And again, you can choose what standard of metadata you want to follow. All right. Additional download types. If you want to have a file geodatabase download or some other type of distribution, you can do that by, in the metadata, listing additional distributions. To do file geodatabase, best way to do it if you're hosting it on online is to download it and host it somewhere, maybe as an item in online, and then list that link to the file geodatabase as a resource on the underlying data. So that's a way to do that. In the metadata editor in online, you can basically add any number of additional distributions. So if you have other resources attached to your data that you want on this little pull down, all you have to do is edit your metadata and add additional distributions to that, and you'll get those there. And you can name them whatever you want, and you can go nuts. So that's a good way to do that as well. I get that question a lot, and I'm happy to walk through that. Connected content is at the bottom of each data sets. This will show you web maps and apps that use the same service. So make a web map or an app that uses the same service. It's a good way to visualize the data. If you're a layman user and you come to this page and you look at this and you see the nice colorful thing at the bottom, you're going to click on the colorful thing at the bottom to explore the data, and that's kind of exactly what you want. They're not downloading it yet. They're exploring your data and figuring out if they want to download it and what is in this data. And chances are your visualization of the data is going to be better than them dumping it into shapefiles and trying to upload it and doing all that. So you might be able to just service the open data need right here with those types of applications. Also, if the user clicks on any of those fields, we do try to aggregate the data in a little chart. We're working to improve that functionality because sometimes you get a weird chart depending on the data. But there is kind of like light exploration. Data that's spatial, we support tabular data. I'd like to just say that out loud because some people say that we don't. We support everything: PowerPoint, PDF, table data, MP3s. If you can upload it, you can make it open data. But table data that has a spatial component, you can actually use the map to filter it down, and there's also a data tab that you can, right there in the middle, that you can use to filter the table and download just a subset of the data, which is cool. I mentioned license. I know you guys aren't lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, so consult one if you're not really sure. But Creative Commons is an organization that is pretty well established, and people know what Creative Commons licenses are. The most open is CC0. In the item details page for your service, there's a use section. It's just a text field. If you put the letter CC0 in there, it will actually, we're smart enough to render that as a little Creative Commons badge. And that badge looks familiar to people who know what these licenses are. And you can even click that badge and it takes you to Creative Commons' website that defines what that license means. Most open means you can use it, resell it, and go nuts. Least open is you can't resell it. If you put it in your product, you just open sourced your product, and there's all sorts of other kind of levels. There's even a questionnaire on Creative Commons website that'll help you figure out what type of license to apply. So definitely check that out, or consult somebody that may know in your organization what you should put on your data. I know different counties and different governments have different rules, state to state, country to country. So this isn't the only type of license, and you can obviously put any text in there that you want. It'll just show up in our app as a custom license if you dump in some lawyer speak, and that's good. I definitely recommend you set this, though, because a lot of journalists and people like that won't use your data if it's not licensed. It's like just the Wild West. It could be your science experiment where you changed all the values of something, and they're just not going to trust it. Or they'll email you and ask you if it's legitimate, and that's annoying. So license your data. Okay, so I can show you kind of all of that. I'm not going to do all of those best practices. Hopefully you took note of them. This deck is available online as a resource, or if you want just to come get my business card after, I can send you a copy if you didn't get everything. But I'll show you what making an open data group is, how I bring in data, and I'll show you doing that using the initiative as well as kind of manually. Please hold. Okay, so first we want to, let's do it through the initiative because that's kind of the cool thing. So initiatives, the idea here is that we're a little more prescriptive about the types of data we recommend you start your open data journey with. So on the initiatives tab, there's like one included initiative with your subscription to ArcGIS Online, and that's this open data initiative that's right here at the top. What this will do is I can join it and give it the name Share Open Data. This will actually make my open data group for me in the back end and kind of behind the scenes. So that's nice. I don't have to do that. And then I'm able to get a website to advertise my open data. We have a nice template here you can preview, but I know what it looks like, so I'm just going to get it. It'll actually create it from our template. It'll generate you a URL based on the name of the initiative. So I think I called mine Share Open Data, and I think we're going to get a site that's like shareopendata-myorgshort.hub.arcgis.com. It takes a second. When it's all done, I can view it. Notice it's privately shared, so I don't have to worry about the public being able to view my site just yet. Fear not, if they go to this URL that was just generated, they will get a login screen. And that's actually cool, because you might not ever want to make your open data site open. Maybe you want to use it internally. Some people actually do that, and that's fine. It just means you need a login in ArcGIS Online to be able to view it. So if I...
The groups has to be public.
The group has to be public, but my site itself can be private. It's an item now in online. So if my site is private, like this one is, I'll actually show you what happens. And I try to go to it. It's like, nope, got to log in. And I have to be a member of your organization with visibility to that item. And otherwise, I'll get it denied. So
The data is still accessible if you do it public.
the data is actually accessible if the item is shared. I'll talk a little bit about that. We can actually do private data in open data now too. That's brand new as of a week ago, so I'll talk about that in a moment. And that's really confusing because this session's about open data, but
Closed open data.
yeah, no, we don't know what to call that feature because we're like private closed open data. That makes sense. Anyway, I could talk all about that for a while. This is the template that we got. This is a starting point. It's a bunch of ideas. It tells you a little bit about what the hub is. It tells you about the different pages we recommend and the different types of data. So the nice thing about the initiative approach is that we kind of drive you towards a couple of data sets we think are important for a local government, like 311 type data. So if I wanted to share my 311 data, it basically asks you for a couple of data sets. And I apologize, the screen is so small, I can make it a little bit bigger. But it's saying basically, I'm looking for a data set called service requests, whatever that means to you. And there's generally like 6 types of things that are useful, like a description of the request, the type of request, where it happened, when it was open, when it was closed, and what's the current status. You may or may not be able to match to this schema, but if you have a data set that's pretty close, I don't, but I can go to online and find 311 data from loving open data people. And let's see. I'm going to guess that this is the right one. So I'll take this 311 data set they brought, and I can basically match up my data to what we're asking for. So it's like description. I'll take incident description and match it to that. Service type, I'll take type. Address, we have that, luckily. The date, I don't have a close date. I'll just pick the same date twice because I want to see that page. And at the bottom, I have status, which is this one. Once I do this, what's nice is we've built little templates for each of the different types of data. And those templates have light information products that we're also templating. So we'll give you a little web map. We create a page that then is tucked under your open data site. And then you can basically view that. And so now I have my 301 data somewhere. Did I lose it? Yeah, there it is. Sorry. It's a page hanging off my site. And that brings me to my next point about open data, which is you can have multiple pages underneath each open data site. So you can get pretty crazy. You can talk about each data set. You can talk about each department. You can talk about each project. You can put maps and things on them. You can show little charts about the data set that we just opened. And these are some recommendations, like, hey, make how many service requests are out there. It looks like this data set wasn't that great, but I picked at random, so that's the folly of a demo. But then there's other templates here for addresses, school data, and transit data. We're not saying this is the only open data that's out there. We're just giving you kind of a little bit of an idea of what we've seen as a pattern for doing open data. So that's one way to do it. That's the newer way, quote unquote. The older way, which is equally as fun, is to go into ArcGIS Online. You can make a new group. So I'll call this my old school OD group. And give it my UC tag. This is where we want the group to be public. All these other settings are fine, but we got to check this box that says designated as an open data group, which just says it's a special type of group. Now, back to the private versus public thing for a second. You can put private items in a public group, and they will stay private. You have to share the items publicly. So if you're not, you can actually put any number of data catalog you want, both private and public. And I'll show you how on your open data site you would see the other content. It is a new capability that we have. But if you want your data to be public, make sure the data is shared with everyone and put it in this group, share it to this group. So let's do that right now. I have a couple of sweet data sets from Washington, D.C., where I'm from. I got where the nightclubs are and where the polling places are and where the buses are. And it tells you a little bit about myself at the same time. So I can share it to the group, and I'm going to put it in my old school open data group. And that is effectively building my catalog of open data. I can take things in and out of that, and it'll update. Then, if I want to build a site manually, meaning not from this initiative template, but just from a kind of a starting site template, I'm going to ignore that site that already exists. And again, you can have as many sites as you want, so don't be shy. You can have my old school open data site. That's what shows up at the top of the page. I can set my URL here. Notice as I type, I get this URL down here. I also can do a custom domain once I create it. If you have an IT guy and they can make a CNAME DNS entry and point it to opendata.arcgis.com, you can then register with this here, and you can actually run your site off of your own domain, which is cool. I will say we do not yet support HTTPS custom domains. It's a bummer right now, and it's something we're working on. So you can have HTTPS domains that we give you, or you can have custom HTTP domains, not both. And we're working on it. You can also plug in your own Google Analytics key. If you get a boss that says, how many times are people downloading this? Go sign up for Google Analytics account or use one you already have and plug the key in here, and you'll have the greatest product at managing web traffic that's out there right now. It doesn't cost anything for you to use in that environment. Change the base map once you're done. You can always come back to these settings. It's not like a one-time thing. It's going to create that item in ArcGIS Online that is the site item. And now I get to pick which of my open data groups do I want to be on this site. And I can pick my old school open data group. I can also pick other groups from other governments. So unchecking that box, I can search all the open data groups that are out there. And this is where you can, I'm in DC, we got Maryland and Virginia near us. Those are other jurisdictions. I can put all of their groups on my open data site so that if somebody comes to DC, they see Virginia data because, again, it's one big area. We're all butting up against each other. And to a user, it probably makes sense to be able to find other GIS departments from other places on those open data sites and shows that partnership. When I click Next, I'm taken to the blank site here. This is the starting point. If you come from the Create New Site button, and I'll tell you a little bit about this in a moment. I think I have just like a slide or two about it. But first, so customizing your website. A couple pre-steps. I recommend you create a shared theme, which is a setting in your org. The cool thing about shared themes is every site you create will use that shared theme. If you don't know what a shared theme is, it's because it was released in 5.1 of ArcGIS Online in February. But you can set like heading colors, text colors, link colors, and the nice thing is we reuse that theme object. You can change the theme once you have it, but it's a nice starting point. It'll also use your logo as well, so make sure you have that. I also recommend if you're about to do this for the first time that you sit down with like that and make like a little site map of like have a plan and run that plan by the people that care about those plans before you make the site. Otherwise, you'll just have to revisit your work. It's good to have kind of a plan of attack. I'm going to have these 3 sites. They're going to have these 2 pages. And this is what it's going to look like. Or I'm going to have 1 site and it's going to have 4 pages. Like, just have a kind of a strategy going in so you don't, just start making things and then try to get people to sign off on it. It's better to have the plan than follow through on that. Site creation through initiative we talked about. And we just talked about site creation through the hub. We just showed you both of those, so don't need to hit that one again. I will show you this link, but this is the slide to take a picture of. Like, if you take nothing else, this link is cool. It's got a lot of best practices on it. We made it for the Dev Summit this year, and we have been keeping it up to date with little tricks. It is, obviously, I'm going to show you all the base functionality of Open Data, but you can do a lot of really cool custom things, and we have them all listed here. If you went to Courtney Klassen's best practices talk, she went through all these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll show you the site, and you can look at it on your own. Yeah.
You talk about two ways to publish your open data site, one from the initiative, one from the hub.
Yeah.
What about the old way? Is not there anymore?
No, those are the two ways. The initiative is the new way, and the old way is the thing I just did with the create new site button and picking the group. That's the.
It's in the hub, but usually it was under the open data, under the setting.
All we did is change the name of the application, so it's the exact same. That create new site button has been there for the last ever since we launched the admin application. That might predate my time at Esri, but it hasn't changed recently. We just named the product something else and gave it a few more capabilities, specifically initiatives and community, which is a separate talk for another day. By the way, the hub is a separate licensable product, but you'll find out where in the product you license these other things. It's mostly around managing a community, and you don't have to worry about that. We're going to just do open data, and that's included with your subscription. So even though we're doing it in the hub, there's this whole community management bit. Come talk to me after if you're interested in what that is. But it's kind of in an early access at this point. Okay, so customizing the site. Let's go back. So if you lose your way, go back to your sites list. There's this site editor button. It'll take me into our site editor. It's a WYSIWYG interface. What you see is what you get. We try to preview the site as you build it. As I move my mouse around, if you can see it back there, I'm getting these little controls for each object that's on the page. I mentioned we had a row layout, so as I kind of go down the page, you can see where my rows are. I can delete whole rows with the X, and that takes all the content that's in it with it. There's a save button, so if I don't want to do that, I can just refresh and get it all back. I can also click this gear. The gear will take me to the settings of the object that I'm looking at. So this is the row. Rows have text color, background color, and an image. I can change that if I want. And cards that are inside have the same controls as well, but each card behaves differently. So this is a text card. When I click this gear, you'll see I have some HTML written into this text card. You can do whatever you want with HTML. We support all of the HTML. We also support Bootstrap classes, if you know what those are. We also support Markdown, which is really easy. It's like writing a wiki. So I can write something like a header with a pound. I can do a header level 2 with 2 pounds. I can do a bulleted list of things. And Markdown's documentation is right here at the bottom. So if you're not sure what Markdown is, it'll render like that.
JavaScript also support?
We do not support JavaScript. We do support style tags and things like that, but we are having some problems with supportability of JavaScript. What I would ask you is tell me what you want, and I will try to get that card on our backlog, because we were having problems with JavaScript interfering with the JavaScript that renders these sites. So the better way for us is to give you the component you need, and rather than being a completely flexible web platform, we are trying to be that user-friendly balance. But people have done some pretty creative things. You can dump in script tags, and you can do. It's at the end of the day, it'll host in that container. But
You cannot guarantee.
I cannot guarantee it. And we were running into problems where people were doing JavaScript and trying to select over our selectors, and then they would call us and say it's broken, and we'd be like, well, it was kind of a. So we were more containered now, but it is pretty flexible. And if you know a good bit about web development, you can take this pretty far. Some of the websites that are out there, you can host a lot of crazy things on here if you know what you're doing. This is getting started, guys. So if I want to add something to this site, or not just delete things, I pull this drawer out, and we have 4 sections. Header settings let me pick what my header looks like. By default, we have a really simple one, but you can do a custom HTML and CSS header. So this one, we give you like a starting point, but you can totally edit the entire header and drop in your brand's header that's up there. We will keep this sign-in bar at the bottom, so you have to take that into account because we need the sign-in button to be somewhere, and we need the My Data and the download section to be somewhere. So be aware of that, but when I show you some examples, a lot of people just make it the same color as their background, and it fits right in. Or you can just use the logo. You can change the site title, you can change the logo. This is your shared theme coming from your org. This is why setting it is nice. Every site you create has it already set to the theme. If you want to override it, though, and just do something awful, like I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I can click apply, and we can change the header background color to that green color. And, This is why I don't design. And the layout builder is where most of the action is. If you're adding content to the site, I mentioned we're a row-based layout. Start with a row. If you need a new space, it drops that in. You can change the color of the row, put a picture behind it. Then you can put content inside the row. I'm going to rattle off what these cards do. Most of them are pretty intuitive. Image card is for hosting images. I will say be careful when hosting images. Don't steal from the internet. You have to have the right to use an image to be able to put it on your website. A great website for finding images is Flickr, because a lot of those images you can attribute. And a good place to do attribution is in your footer. So you can, if you use an image from Flickr, just in the bottom you have to just list who made it, where they made it, or you can put little light small font text beneath the image. We do that a lot in our templates, and in some cases Esri buys images. If you see an image on a template, it is free for you to use. We've bought it on behalf of you, and we OEM it so you can reuse it on all your websites. So don't be afraid of the ones that are in the template, but be afraid of image search in Google and make sure you know what you're doing. Set the alt text so that it's friendly. That's just what screen readers will pick up. We have a banner. The banner is nice because, and I'm actually already using one, but let's do two. The banner is nice because you can enable the search bar on it, and that's usually what you want at the top. You can also add search by location, change all the text. This is how people will search your site. That's what that one is. Text card I already talked about. Category card is a way to search data that's more intuitive. It's actually the most searched way. So definitely do categories. Categories are basically either custom queries of your data or tag searches. So if you want to organize your data by department or by type of data, like boundary data versus parcel data versus something else, all you do is drag a category on. You can pick an icon from a set of icons we have or link to your own. And then you can either use a tag query, a group query, or a custom query. And it's just pretty much like querying in ArcGIS Online. Contact info, self-explanatory, gives you a means to provide your organization and the link. And it's also our nudge, nudge, wink, wink, put some contact info on your site so that people know how to reach you. Charts, this is a way to visualize your information. Right now we support charts that, we support a bar chart as well as a custom JSON-based chart, and we have a spec about this that's listed in our documentation right here at the bottom. So if you're interested in the advanced chart, you can click this and it'll take you to our documentation page where you can read about the different chart types. The basic chart's pretty nice because all you have to do is pick a data set like nightclubs, and I want to, I don't know, FID. Let's do some counting of FID. I don't really know what I'm doing. No, let's change that. Let's pick address. Not a very good chart. It's running, but you can put a bar chart on your page or use a custom one. It'll be as fast as your service is. The other type of chart we have right now is a statistic. The statistic's nice because it's like a single value. Let me move this up so you can see it. So you can basically find a data set and count one. So if I want to count all my polling places by name, I can do that. I have 141 polling places in DC. I did not know that. That's really cool. So yeah, you can feature your data. This is a good way to bring attention-grabbing facts. You can also feature someone else's data, which is cool. I can link in anyone's data at that point. And we're extending the number of charts and all of that support as the year goes on. iframe is kind of our escape hatch out of this website experience. If you want to embed something that is made by somebody else, if you want to put your calendar app in there, if you want to put a Twitter feed, if you want to put an Insights project notebook, if you want to pick something, an iframe is the way to go. Story maps, great. Yeah, you can do story maps, web maps. We actually, for story maps, I recommend you just link to them because they're better experienced in a full screen. But if you have one that fits nicely in a window, the iframe card asks for a URL, and it asks for how big you want it to be in height. So you can do it that way. And the width will be determined by how many things you put left and right of it. So right now it's full width, but if I put something next to it, it'll start to get smaller. Let's see. And then the gallery. The gallery is pretty cool. Gallery is a group-based search for applications right now. So what's nice about this is I can just pick apps in my organization. Apparently I don't have any because I'm a young organization that was just recently created, but it will show you a tile for each app, and you can restrict it by group. And what's nice about that is if you wanted to make a group of all your story maps that you want on your open data site, you can just put a gallery in and then pick that group, and then you'll get a tile for each story map. What's really cool about that is this respects who you're logged in as. So it'll show Joe Public all your publicly shared story maps, but it'll show Paul Private, all the ones that Paul Private has. That's a terrible name. But it's a nice feature because you can actually see a tile for each story map, and it respects your login. So you can give more content to your employees that can log in and look at the site versus content that the public can see. And it's not the best visual styling because it's our like V1 gallery card. We are working pretty soon to update it to use your thumbnails and fixing some font issues. We got a lot of feedback about it after we released it. That was like, this is cool if it didn't look like crap. So you guys are really nice, and we respect that. And our designer was like, I thought it wasn't that bad. Anyway. So those are the layout cards. Kind of gives you an idea of how we can customize the site. Last up is the footer. A custom footer is useful for specifically attribution or moving your contact details or linking back to your government's website or your documentation or anything else that you can think of. But that's kind of the website editing in a nutshell. There's a lot of open data sites that are out there. Go look at, I'll show you a few. The one I've been showing people recently that I really like is GeoHub CA. They like locked down this in Canada. Like, sorry if you're from Canada and you don't live in Brampton because these guys got the really cool domain. But they launched this site, and this kind of implements all the different things that I talked about. So right away, bam, there's your search bar. You can click into that and see all of the data that they're sharing. There's the license. There's that little badge. So if I click this data set, I think that's actually a PDF. Let me pick one that's spatial. You can filter this down. You can see he's got a custom license on it. It visualizes the data. I can explore it in a table. There's my downloads, supporting kind of the main 3 formats for spatial data. There's my APIs that are ticked on for that. And it's pretty easy to just download some of this. It goes into a download queue. And if I'm a user of this site, I can just get the file. If it's a big file and it takes a while, the user can do other things while we're queuing the download up and getting it ready to go. So pretty usable for people coming in and using it. Nice thing about Open Data is we deep link everything, so you can link right to a data set. You can link right to the data tab of a data set. You can link right to the filtered version of the data tab of the data set. So you can really easily share all that. And that's also really good for Google Analytics. You'll see what people are doing by what URLs they're going to and what they're clicking on pretty easily. Up here are multiple pages. I didn't talk about this, so now I'm going to talk about it. If I go back to my site editor, let's save all these changes because this is the best site I've made all day. And I'm going to jump back. Once it saves, updates that item. I jump back here. There's a pages section. If I want to have multiple pages hanging off my site, I can just come here and create a new page. Call it Graham's Dinner Plans. I don't know what they are, but we can work on them together. I actually clicked it twice, and apparently I made 2 pages. Or don't do that. That might be a bug. What the pages do is they inherit your footer and header from your site, and they give you the same layout editing experience, just in a different page. And you can link them together. It'll basically hang off my URL as pages and whatever name I gave my page. So this is, I forget what my URL was, but this will be available at Pages Graham's Dinner Plans, and we remove all the characters that don't work in URLs and put in dashes where there's spaces. So pretty easy, and these are also shareable out. So you can have a private page on a public site, and I don't think you can have a public page on a private site, but I could be mistaken.
Does it show up as a tabs or something?
Yeah, so what Brampton did here, wherever that was, here it is they put it in their header. And these are just links to the different pages that they created. We are, and our backlog is to make a navigation component option in the header that dynamically makes this for you. Haven't done it yet, so you have to do it yourself. Apologies for that. If I click these different things, you can kind of see all the different concepts. Like this is a gallery of apps that they're featuring. This is a gallery of maps. They actually iframed in the gallery of maps. The 2 search bars is a little awkward. We're actually going to work to fix that and add a card for this type of gallery. There's their story maps. They're featured a few story maps. There's their data page, which is just the categories of data. Look at the nice icons they selected. When I pick one of these, it filters that search down just to the business and economy tag. So pretty easy. Kind of shows you all the different pieces. And then on the profile, they actually brought in all their census data and just give you a snapshot and say, hey, here's what it's like to live here. Come move here. It's got 600,000 people. It's like just, not too big, not too small. Average age is 37, et cetera, et cetera. They also featured a web map about the area, and a few more stat cards. And here's some charts made with that chart card. A lot better than the one that I made, but I think mine's pretty good too. So yeah, that's site editing. Let's see what else I have in this PowerPoint. I already talked about making sites and pages. Custom domains I mentioned, just it's in that site configuration, and I gave you the bit about HTTPS. If you tick HTTPS off or on, just know it takes us about an hour to propagate that change. We implement all the redirects for you, so if I wanted to take my site and I go back to the configuration page, there's this enforce HTTPS. This basically makes it so that you have to go to the HTTPS version of the site. If I click test your site first, I will go to the HTTPS version of this site. Do this before you turn it on. If you have portals that are running HTTP, if you have images that are HTTP, they will not work on an HTTPS site. So go to the HTTPS version of your site, look at it, be like, yep, it looks like it's good. Everything's coming back perfectly. This is what I intended. And and then you press this button and we say, that's cool, it's going to take an hour because we have to propagate that and implement that in our infrastructure. But it will probably be faster than that, but about an hour is a safe bet. And now if I go to the HTTP version, it'll just kick me to the HTTPS version. And that improves your page rank in Google, so it's a good idea to do that. It also just kind of complies with best security standards. Nobody's doing things in the clear over HTTP these days. Not nobody, but just it's not where things are going. Data-driven initiatives, I'll tell you now, so this is data sites we've kind of talked about, but we're seeing people who launch open data sites. Basically, this is kind of the history of our team working on open data. Departments worked in silos. Once upon a time, you make an open data site and people can connect to your data, but the people that are using that data are expert citizens and are expert users like academics, academia, your peers, developers, journalists. And really there's a gap here. I don't think my mom cares about any open data site that's out there. I don't think anybody in my family would ever really know what to do with that. So how do you reach the people in your community that actually care about what you're doing? Our recommendation is to launch civic initiatives. These are just 3 examples, like ending homelessness or addressing opiate addiction or improve storm preparedness. But you can make a site about all the things that you're working on, like the projects, the big issues, and then put the data that's relevant to that on that site. Iframe in a survey and ask for some feedback from your citizens on that site. Make something that's more specific to reaching the public. Because this product, the hub, lets you launch as many websites as you want. So the data sites are still really important. It's like the one-stop shop to finding data in your city, and it appeals to the expert users. But to reach the masses, the people that care about specific issues, engage them with initiatives. And a big piece of an initiative is a website featuring what the initiative is and the problem you're trying to solve. Yeah?
If I don't have a license for a hub, can I open few open data sites? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. So the reason we made the hub with template initiatives in it is because people were making initiatives in this open data platform. And so you have the capability to launch as many websites as you want. You can make initiatives now today. All you have to do is think about it in more of a what are the problems and what are the engaging points and what do I want my community to know about those issues. So I would say definitely start with an open data site. That's level 1. Get your data online, get the authoritative sources, get talking with your neighbors. But level 2 is now, okay, let me try to think about how to get more people to become involved with me. And websites are a good way. You can share them. You can I had another talk about engaging your community. You can make Facebook pages around each initiative group. You can have meetings. All of that happens without software. We're just making software that hopefully makes that easier at the same time. That's, I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm going to stay up here. But I do recommend you think about it that way because it will make I think the activities you're doing, the important activities, more approachable from the everyday person. And here's a great example. So on the right, we have ArcGIS Online. And on the left, we have your government's website that may or may not talk about the things you're doing today. You can make this bridge between those two places using these sites. The portal on the right is something that makes sense to GIS professionals, but the pages in the middle make sense to everybody, and they kind of connect you from the government to the data, and do so very elegantly if it's all part of the same website, which in this case, this is Raleigh, North Carolina in the US, these are all the same site, or multiple sites, but all the same header, and they've like navigated between them. So even though we're hosting it with multiple open data sites, it's all one big website. And as a user, I had no idea. I just switched from the government's hosted website on the far left to a GIS platform in the middle. But on the right, the GIS people still have their tool, and all operates on the same data. Pages are a good way to do that too. You can embed things like that. I already talked about that. And engage your community. Have some surveys. Put some things in there that'll help reach your citizens and all that. Okay. So we talked about private open data. Let's show you what that looks like. Private data on hub sites is a new thing, and I'm pretty excited about it because it's been asked about a lot over the years, and we're finally doing it. We get around to things. It is in beta. The only reason it's in beta is there's a lot of types of items and content in ArcGIS Online, and we have to build a UI for each type of thing. So feel free to turn it on and try it. And if you see something that looks a little weird, just know it's because we haven't finished it yet, but we wanted to release it as is and let you use it now. And we'll remove the beta label once we're like checking all the boxes of every type of thing. But we have pretty much the big content like web maps, story maps, applications, data. If I enable private item views at the bottom, what this does is on my open data site, if I preview it, and I'm logged in. That's key. I know it's really hard to see in the upper right, but I am logged in. And I click search. I see all the open data first. But on those left here, I have this ability to look at all of the items that I have visibility to with my login. So when I do that, I can actually see all of my items here. And this is the way to kind of access data that may not be open and public, but available and in that group. So pretty cool way to do things. It's again in beta because I think we're going to polish it up a little bit more, but feel free to take advantage of that and leverage the logins with your sites if you can think of a reason for that. I'm getting low on time, but I had one more topic to talk about, and that's federating data. So open data is easy to federate into things like CCAN or data.gov. A gentleman from Norway came up the last time I gave this talk, and he's going to try to federate into a Norway equivalent. I forget what that site was called. But basically what that does is you can list all of the different data sets that are generated by your organization and point to them in your open data site. To make an item, even for the things that are not hosted by Esri, you can just point to it, like list a third-party URL. Once you have it all in your open data site, we generate something called a data.json off of every site. And that lists the catalog and all the formats for that. So let me just show you a real example of what that all means, because those are all just words. So a good site I'm going to use for this is my good friends in Loudon, Virginia. They've made this site. And every open data site, if I just go to the URL at the top and I type /data.json, I get this lovely piece of JavaScript object notation. Doesn't mean a lot to you, but it lists in it all the different data sets that are here and all the formats that are supported by the underlying services. So I can actually just look through it and read each data set. This one's called Loudon Comp Plan Overlays. Sounds really riveting. But what's cool is in the US, I can go to data.gov, which is a place to kind of search global open data. And I can type in, hold on, I should have copied that, Loudon Comp Plan Overlays, and it finds my data set, and it will actually list all the resources that I have available, all the formats that I'm making available. So all you have to do to register all of your open data is give data.gov your data.json, and they will be able to take it and list all of your resources in this federal resource. And that checks a lot of boxes, makes probably your higher levels of government happier because they can easily look across everything. So that's what federating is. And just do it by getting data.json and giving it to who you need to federate the data to.
Do they have to do it manually, like going one by one?
It's a full list of all of your catalogs and all of your formats inside that data.json.
They're injecting this JSON into their site or what?
What you do is you give that URL, and they will list all of your data sets that you have in that catalog. So if I had 50 things in my open data site, they'll now register you to all 50 of them and list directly to your servers and your resources and where to go to get that information. All they need is that one file, that data.json.
This is how SICAN works? Or
Yep. You give them your catalog and they add it to the master catalog. And we structure that data.json is something that is like a standard, and we comply to that standard. So it actually just all clicks. And the nice thing about that is from data.gov, I can click right to the type of data that I want and get it directly from you, skipping the step of going to your website if I wanted to.
But in this catalog, can you get, for example, you see the shapefile, you see, I don't know, the GeoJSON. Can you then
So I can download GeoJSON.
Can you redirect this guy to your open data site or what?
No. The point of this is that it's going to get you right to where the data is. So I can actually just download the data. I literally am skipping the step of going to your website. I'm going to just get the data right from wherever you're hosting it. There is a reference, though. I can click the visit page at the top. See, it says ArcGIS Open Data Set. I click that, and I am taken to Loudon's website here. So there is a way to get to your website, but if you pick a data format, we're going to get you right to the data format. And that's how those things work. Okay, so that's, I think, unless I forgot something. Oh yeah, what's next? I think I mentioned some of these. I'm merely a human, and I make wrong statements all the time. I'm not a machine. So don't rely 100% on what I tell you, but I'm going to try to give you an accurate view of the future from my team. So these are some of the features we're working on. The first thing to come out, which will probably be out next Tuesday, is using a page in multiple sites. So you can make like an about your city and use it in all of your sites. So that's going to be a big one. We've been asked a lot to be able to clone sites. So like to copy this site and make another one. That's especially important if you want to make changes. And I think a bunch of people with Spears last year were like, when are you giving this to us? So we're definitely working on it. It's got some trickiness, which is why it hasn't happened yet, but it's a priority for us. Custom fonts is really important. We've had a couple of our customers say they cannot use our solution because I can't change the font, and that's reasonable because that's in a brand guideline, and we need to get that in there. We have one developer working totally on expanding our chart options and what's in that library. That library is also being used in partnership with Story Maps and Insights, so kind of all three of our teams are all working together to try to make those charting options more powerful. We want to make cards for a lot of the other Esri type of content, like web maps specifically. Iframing is slow. If you're a web developer, it kind of takes a second to load in. If we do a kind of a JavaScript approach, we'll be really quick, and your site will perform better. We want to improve statistic card so that it can dynamically turn red or green and things like that, depending on how the numbers are. And also new templates of how that data is visualized. And the big one, and this is my furthest off in the future, but we're aiming to put the sites and pages capability into Portal in 10.6. I don't know if that's I feel like 70% like we're going to make it, but there's a lot of things that require us to get into Portal. We have to pass a lot of accreditation. It's a much more strict product because it goes on premise in a lot of secured places. So that one has been asked a lot. Right now, Open Data and the sites and pages capability is only in online, but we are working to move pieces of it into Portal. If you're going to bet on which thing doesn't make it, the bottom one is the most risky, but we are working on it, and it is a priority for us. So I wanted to just thank you for attending this session at 4:30, on a, Thursday, Friday, I don't even know what day it is, and also making your data accessible to your community. I think the work you do is so important to getting kind of it out of the the GIS mindset and, into the hands of your citizens. And please take our survey if this session was valuable on the Esri Events app. And now questions. Gentleman in the back with the green hat.
Is there any reason why the first step of opening the changing the organization to allowing open data, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to do that?
No, I wasn't here for when they implemented it as a toggle, but I think it's just it adds some properties to your portal properties.json.
I work for a very big organization, so unless you do that.
Okay, it's free. Tell them to talk to their rep. It's not something they should be afraid of. Yeah.
Have you all increased the number of features to be added? Because there is, in the last time, they said limited 10,000.
That limit.
Less than 5,000 features. I have a data set.
That limit no longer exists. That limit was on the 110 sites. Our 2.0 sites, you can download features over 10. You can have over 10,000 features in your download now.
Yeah.
Yes. Go to hub.arcgis.com and just find a big data set and download it, and you can now do that. That's a 110 limitation. So recent, as of I would say mid last year, if you have a 110 site, so older open data sites are legacy, and they show up on this legacy tab. You have to upgrade your site to a 2.0 site to get that. Let me show you what that looks like. Just real quick. And while I'm pulling this up, does anybody else have another question?
Yes, also, I need to add.
Okay.
You said, you mentioned Tableau. I want to incorporate Tableau.
Just in a Tableau dashboard, if you click share, there's a set of iframe code that it'll give you, and you just have to paste that URL into our iframe card, and it'll put it.
Tableau.
You in Tableau need to get their URL. That is the URL that you will iframe from their web product, and put it in our iframe card on the site, and that will embed a Tableau window into your open data site. Sorry, real quick, just to show you, there are old versions of sites that we weren't unable to just seamlessly upgrade, and we require you to upgrade them and redesign your site with our new layout editor. All I have shown you today is our new layout editor, but there is behind the scenes an older version of sites. If I go to this org, you'll notice they have a legacy sites. If your site is legacy, it has a big warning saying, we're about to stop supporting this as of July 31st, 2017. You'll still be able to host it, but you're not going to be able to edit it. And we click that Learn More button. It will create you an equivalent site in our new one, and you have to redesign the page layout. It'll carry over your catalog and all the data. If you go to a new site, then we no longer have that limit. So chances are, if you're used to seeing a 10,000 limit on your open data site, it's because it's on this legacy list, and it has this this big splash warning in our admin application telling you.
So now if I go to the site editor, will I see that legacy tab?
Yeah, probably. If you have a legacy site, it'll show up. If you don't, you'll just never see it. And you'll know it's not legacy because you don't have a banner. So just check it out, and if you have a problem, get in touch with us, because we should be beyond that limit on our newer sites.
Okay.
Other question? Yeah?
If you have an ISO XML file for your metadata that's already hosted, say, on your own server or some repository somewhere, can you point to that?
You can actually download it and attach it to the online equivalent, and it's pretty easy. In the XML editor, it's not the most user-friendly thing, but there's an open button, and clicking that will let you point to a local XML file and just attach to it. I don't think you can reference a URL that's hosted somewhere else. I think you have to move the metadata over into the online item.